Welcome back to our summary study of the Brhad Bhagavatamrta, given to us by Sanatan Goswami. This is Volume 1. Volume 1 is the quest of Narada Muni in search of who's the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. It will begin on Earth. It'll continue up through the heavenly planets, the upper planetary systems. And in addition, it'll take Narada Muni to Dwarka, where he will see Uddhava, Krishna, his queens, and Balaram. Sanat Goswami says that the end of this quest indicates the conclusion of the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions and teachings. The story is told by Jayamini Rishi to Ganamanjaya. Ganamanjaya is the son of Pariksit Maharaj. This story was first told by Pariksit Maharaj to his mother Uttara. After Pariksit Maharaj had listened to Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days, he got up and he left, and his mother was relatively close by, and so he approached his mother. And his mother wanted to know the essence of what you had heard. She knows that he only has very, very short time left. Time is of the essence, and therefore extract the essence of what you have learned from Sukadeva Goswami, and that is the Brhad Bhagavatamrta. Sukadeva Goswami requested Jayamini Rishi, who had listened for 7 days, you should follow Pariksit and listen to that conversation. He knows that he's qualified to hear this conversation and then later on repeat it, which he is doing now to Pariksit's son, Ganamanjaya. In the first purport, Sanatan Goswami, in text 1 of chapter 1, the very first purport, he says, to prepare us for hearing the super excellence, the super excellent glories of Goloka, Krishna's personal abode, the 7 chapters in part 1 of Brhad Bhagavatamrta were meant for gradually removing all obstructions and any misconceptions. By the end of this volume, it should be very clear that who is the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. He continues this by providing the excellence of the gopis' love. The supreme excellence of Krishna is also proved. This indicates the goal of this work by describing the objects of the Lord's mercy, and ultimately by explaining the greatness of the gopis. The Lord's special prema for them is also shown. The story begins. There was a group of exalted sages at Prayag during the month of Magh. The sages had taken their bath and they were all feeling very satisfied. And they started to talk amongst each other. And one would say, surely you're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. And they would glorify each other in this way. But that person would say, no, I'm not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. This sage over here, he's the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. But that person would also deny being the greatest recipient, and he would point to somebody else and say that they were the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. A first-class Brahmin arrived there, and he had collected all sorts of valuable items for the worship of the Lord. He cleansed the entire area. He made an altar, and he put up a nice canopy, and he worshiped Shalagram Shila. He also worshiped the Brahmins, and then he made a boga offering, and then he distributed that prasadam to all the sages and the Brahmins and all the others, whoever else was there, and even to the animals. And after he did all that, he and his family members and his followers took the remnants. Narada Muni, observing all of this, came out of the crowd of sages and approached this Brahmin and said, surely you are the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. But that Brahmin said, no, I am not the greatest recipient of his mercy. He exhibited his humility and implored Narada Muni and rejected his praise. He said, if you want to know who the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy is, very near here is a kingdom. And this king very opulently worships the Lord. You should visit him. There you will see who the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy is. So now one by one, Narada Muni will go through these different individuals he meets briefly. But then we'll go back and we'll get into just one of them and we'll unpack just one of them. And they're all similar. They explain to Narada Muni in great detail why they aren't the greatest recipient and then why this other person is more deserving of Krishna's mercy than they are. He goes and visits the king. He sees how opulently the worship there of the Lord is in his kingdom. And he approaches the king and he says, surely you're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. But the king refutes Narada Muni's praise. And he says, I am not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. If you want to know and see who the greatest recipient is, go see Indra. He's the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Narada Muni, he traveled and he visited Indra and he praised Indra. And he said, surely you're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. But Indra denied being the greatest recipient. He said, I am not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. If you want to know who the greatest recipient is, go see Lord Brahma. He's the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Narada Muni, he travels to see Brahma and he glorifies Lord Brahma. And he says, Brahma, you surely are the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. And Brahma denies it. He refutes his praise and says, I am not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. If you want to know who the greatest recipient is, go visit Lord Shiva. He's the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Narada Muni, he goes and he visits Lord Shiva and Parvati's there and he praises Shiva and he glorifies Shiva. And he says, surely you're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Lord Shiva becomes a little angry and he denies it. He says, no way, I'm not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. If you want to know who that is, you should go visit Prahlad. He's the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Narada Muni, he goes and he travels and he sees Prahlad and he approaches Prahlad and he praises Prahlad. And he tells him, Prahlad, surely you're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Prahlad says, no, I'm not the greatest recipient, and denies that the fact that he's the greatest recipient. And he said, if you want to know who that is, go visit Hanuman. He's the greatest recipient. So Narada Muni, he travels and sees Hanuman, and he praises Hanuman. He approaches Hanuman, and he glorifies Hanuman as being the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. But he also denies being the greatest recipient. He tells him, if you want to know who the greatest recipient is, go visit the Pandavas. They're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Narada Muni, he travels and he comes and sees the Pandavas and he approaches Yudhisthira and he praises Yudhisthira and he tells Yudhisthira, surely you're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. All of you Pandavas are the greatest recipient. And they all deny that they are the greatest recipient. And one by one, Yudhisthira refutes Narada Muni. He says, I am not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Bhima says, I am not the recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Arjuna says, I am not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Nakula Dev and Sahadev, they refute Narada Muni. And they say that we are not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. And similarly, Draupadi and Queen Kunti also deny being the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. They say if you really want to know who that recipient is, who is the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy, go visit the Yadavas. They are the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. Narada Muni, he travels and goes and visits the Yadavas. And similarly, he glorifies the Yadavas. And he says, surely y'all are the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. But they all deny being the greatest recipient. They said, if you want to know who the greatest recipient is, Go visit Uddhava. So that is the end of chapter 5. And in chapter 6, we'll pick up where Narada Muni travels to Dwarka and visits Uddhava. Now we're going to go back to the Lord Brahma, where Narada Muni visits him, and we're going to unpack his story a little bit more. And all of them are just as similar. They're all exhibiting such great humility in denying that they're the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. And they're given all kinds of excuses explaining why they are not the greatest recipient of Lord Krishna's mercy. And there are a lot of nice commentaries by Sanatana Goswami throughout this volume of Brhad Bhagavatamrta. So begin is chapter 2, text 55. Merely by hearing what Narada said, Brahma grew disturbed. He anxiously covered his 8 ears and said over and over again, I am just a servant. By the power of Krishna's Maya, I am always deluded by various conceits. I think myself the controller, grandfather, and spiritual master of the universe. Proud of my birth from Krishna's lotus navel, I think myself a great ascetic, his great worshiper. I am overwhelmed by the countless duties of universal management. Worrying about the imminent destruction of my planet, I live in terror of the all-devouring end of time. All I want for myself is liberation. Forget about my having any devotion for him. I would be happy if it were only true, that I never offended him. I cannot expect him to tolerate my offenses as he does Lord Shiva. So now Brahma's beginning to direct Narada Muni's attention away from him towards Shiva. With benedictions obtained from me, the wicked Hiranyakasipu became the tormentor of all the worlds, dedicated to violence against Vaishnavas. After the Lord, in his form as Nrsingadev, destroyed Hiranyakasipu, I and my entourage stood fearful at a distance, trying to praise the Lord with skillful prayers. But he would not even honor us with a sidelong glance. Yet when Prahlad was inaugurated king, the Lord at once became pacified. Now he's trying to direct him towards Prahlad also as being a greater recipient of the Lord's mercy than he is. So he continues, then I slowly approached him, and he angrily ordered me, you should not give such benediction to demons, O lotus-born. Nonetheless, I kept on giving benedictions to wicked demons like Ravana. Whose tongue can even mention the sins Ravana has done? And recently, by my magic, I stole the calves and young friends from the Lord. I took them away while they were having lunch. Fearing I would commit more offenses if I stayed there too long, I then went away. What else need I tell you about my ill fortune? So that's a sample from Lord Brahma. Similarly, the other devotees give us a similar response based on their experience with the Lord. That's the end of this first part of the Brhad Bhagavatamrta. This is chapters 1 through 5. And we'll pick up at chapter 6 where Narada Muni travels to Dwarka. I want to thank you very much for listening to this video. I hope you come back for the next episode. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to all the Vaishnava devotees. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.